The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi there and welcome from Studio 27 in Sacramento, California, and to our other panelists and attendees across the U.S., Canada, and the UK to today's webinar, Engineers' Use of Social Networks Today and Where It's Heading. Sponsored by Novel, a web-based application integrating technical information with analytical and search tools to drive innovation and deliver answers engineers can answer. And hosted by WebAttract, your end-to-end solution provider for informational webinars. Hi, I'm Mike Agron, the executive webinar producer with WebAttract, and I'll be your moderator and one of your hosts for today's session. And in just a moment, I'll be introducing our panel of thought leaders as today's webinar is hearing from these experts discussing real trends, challenges, and opportunities from use of professional networking sites. You'll also have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of our panel discussion during our Ask the Experts panel with all the panelists. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. And thought we'd take a moment to say who's in attendance. We're really thrilled. We have a diverse audience of over 500 professionals. They've registered from 16 countries. You represent 37 states and provinces. And these are the basic industries that attended. As you can see, engineering, design, and construction is at the top with 30%, aerospace and defense, industrial equipment, oil and gas, specialty chemicals, and automotive. But regardless of what your industry segment or role is, we're absolutely confident you're going to find today's webinar of value. We now want to do our first poll. And the way we're going to do this poll is by asking you to raise your hands. And the way that you do that is to take a look at your control panel here. And when I ask the question, please raise your hand if you currently use some type of social networking or collaboration tool for professional use. I'd like to see what that looks like. Well, quite interesting. Looks like 52% of you use some type of social networking or collaboration tool for professional use. Well, you came to the right place. Terrific. Now what I would like to do is briefly introduce our host and sponsor, who's Ross Graber, who's the Director of Marketing at Novel. And he's just going to take a quick minute to officially welcome you and express what he hopes you'll get out of today. So, Ross, I want to welcome you to the webinar, and how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thank you.
Good.
So, good afternoon to everybody. As Mike said, my name is Ross Graber, and I am Novel's Director of Marketing. Novel's sponsoring today's webinar, and I wanted to start by thanking you for joining us. If you're not familiar with Novel, Novel provides a web-based application for engineers that integrates technical information with analytical and search tools. Novel's goal is to deliver answers that engineers can trust as they problem solve and pursue new innovations. Now, I'm very excited for Novel to be putting on today's session, and I wanted to share why Novel and I find this issue so important and really so compelling. Novel's mission involves ensuring that engineers have the right technical information to do their jobs. The use of social networks by engineers directly affects the way engineers acquire the information they need. As such, it's important for us to understand, promote, and ultimately support the role social networking plays in problem solving. Online professional social networking is a new and rapidly developing area. I feel that one of the ways that Novel can help is by facilitating the sharing of information about online social networks by engaging leaders with deep expertise in this area. With today's webinar, we are creating a venue to allow our panel of experts to tell their stories about what they see happening, what they see working, and where online social networking can actually help. In turn, as attendees, I trust that you'll be able to apply these thoughts in these situations and better use social networking to your professional advantages. Now again, thank you very much for attending, and I am very much looking forward to the substance of this webinar.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Well, let's get right to it. We've got a real treat in store. Some real thought leaders are going to be speaking to you, and you're going to hear from our panel. And first we're going to start with Kate Worlock, and then we're going to be followed by Alan Belniak and then Satya Segal. And they all have some terrific perspectives and insights to share. So Kate's going to start the discussion around some of the recent research that she's done on the usage and application of social media. And then we're going to get Alan and Sats to share her with her conclusions, as well as give you their perspectives. Let me just say a little bit about Kate. In her capacity as director and lead analyst, she leads Outsell's coverage and research on educational publishing, which is K-12, higher ed, and training. And in addition, she tracks the usage and application of social media, assessing the relevance to publishing and information businesses. Her expertise in education markets, information industry trends and strategies, credit and financial information markets, scientific, technical, and medical information markets is what she focuses on. Kate, it is indeed a pleasure to welcome you and calling all the way from UK to be part of today's webinar. I'm now going to turn this portion over to you, and welcome.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to be able to be here this evening, or this afternoon for everybody else. First of all, I just wanted to give a little bit of background about Outsell and about the research that we've undertaken looking at the usage of social networks by engineers. Outsell is a research and advisory firm focused on the publishing and information industries. We produce fact-based analysis and advice about competitors, markets, benchmarks, and best practice. And we have a range of offerings that you can have a look at on our website. What we've done, and I'll be reporting back on today, is to look at how engineers use social networks. And I'm going to be comparing that to some of the wider research that we did about how professionals in general use social networks. I'll be discussing some of the conclusions about our findings a bit later in this webinar. We believe that monitoring social network trends is very important because of the speed at which these networks are being taken up and the way in which usage is changing very, very quickly. We've identified specifically engineers' perspectives on social networks, as well as perspectives and behaviors relating to other professionals in other different marketplaces. The research also provided some insights into the spectrum of social network options for other highly specialized knowledge workers, and those may be able to provide some exemplars for serving the engineers' marketplace. So coming up will be some of our data and statistics. And what we found was that 56% of the engineers that we surveyed used the social network. So that's reasonably similar to the number that we've got here on the webinar today. Mike already found earlier that about 52% of the delegates were using social networks today. Of those, around a third were using the networks for professional rather than personal purposes. Professional networks are obviously very, very important, but usage of those still hasn't quite caught up with the personal usage. There are many groups available to join, though. As of November 2009, we found just over 6,500 English language engineering-related groups listed on LinkedIn. Just over 1,500 were professional groups and 480 were corporate groups. LinkedIn is the most important professional platform for engineers, with around 27% of all engineers surveyed using the site for either professional or both professional and personal purposes. Facebook is the most popular social network, but the vast majority of those using Facebook are doing so for personal rather than professional reasons. And we found that this was also the case with professional users who were not engineers. We did also find that the usage of social networking platforms varies by the type of engineers that we spoke to. Some of the directional data from the survey suggested that the early adopters were concentrated in the software and IT segments in energy, electronics, and engineering services, and also indicated that engineers working in government and those in highly sensitive aerospace and defense sectors were currently least likely to be using external networks. This is likely due to concerns around sharing potentially sensitive data, and perhaps explains why many respondents were looking for a private collaboration space to use within a public social network. Engineers whose roles involved developing new processes or designing new products reported the highest usage of social networking services. Age remains a significant factor at the moment, and that's true of engineers and of professionals as a whole, but it's becoming less and less the case. We found that the greatest variances exist at the edges. More than 80% of engineers aged under 30 reported using social networks, but almost 80% of those who were 50 plus did not use social networks. LinkedIn effectively serves as an equalizer, though, with almost equal numbers of under 30s and 30 to 50-year-olds reporting usage, about a third of the age cohort. Most of the engineers using Facebook are currently under 30, but LinkedIn is used professionally by slightly more 30 to 49-year-olds than by under 30s. The other important factor was the size of the company that the engineers were working for. We found that engineers who worked for smaller companies were slightly more enthusiastic adopters of social networking platforms than those in medium-sized or larger corporations. And that is probably because they're keen to network in order to drive business, and they need to tap into external resources and contacts in order to undertake their work effectively. The usage we found, interestingly, was greatest within the smallest and also some of the largest corporations, with mid-range organizations showing the lowest usage in all categories. We think this is likely because these users have sufficient internal resources and connections, but they have insufficient time, so they really are looking for external resources to help them. The ways in which users look for and use information is largely the same between users and non-users of social networks. Most engineers use the internet as a starting point. They do some kind of search. If they don't find what they're looking for, they tend then to go to the intranet and then the library. About 70% rely on search, and around 30% rely on information being pushed through to them. If they're not successful after using these options, about 55% will ask colleagues inside the company. 8% try to talk to contacts which are outside their businesses. Engineers who are users of social networks pointed to greater challenges in finding the information they need for their jobs. They cited gaps in coverage, uncertainty about the availability of information, difficulty in finding and using information, and lack of corporate support. Non-users, in contrast, said that the problems they found were more to do with information overload, so insufficient time, and not knowing what's out there. When it comes to how engineers use other new media, not just networking sites, non-users of social networks reported significantly higher usage of intranet postings. They found a much greater tendency to tap into peer-to-peer resources within the organization that they worked for, rather than opening up discussions to a broader social network. Users of social networks, by contrast, reported slightly higher use of blogs and audio blogs and virtual worlds, which is a pattern that suggests perhaps a greater need for interaction and to share or publish or retrieve information resources. There are a range of barriers that we saw people reporting as to why they didn't want to take up or use social networking services as part of their day-to-day job. Privacy issues were often cited, and there were concerns about a blurring of professional and personal boundaries. In addition to privacy, there were concerns about security. Many people felt that social networks were an inappropriate forum for sensitive technical discussions. Age, again, was an issue. There was lack of uptake amongst late career engineers. They either felt that they didn't need those kinds of services or really weren't aware what was out there. Also, they were already experienced users of libraries and other resources, so they didn't find a great need to try to access a social network to answer questions. Within larger corporations, there was a lack of need, partly because they had a large internal network that they could reach out to and so had no need for external networking. In some cases, corporations actively discouraged the use of social networking, having found that there was a negative impact on productivity and that it was a distracting technology. Using social networks, I think, really requires a huge shift in culture inside some organizations towards a knowledge-sharing environment, and that can be very challenging. When engineers can't find the information they're looking for, they tend to look internally first and hope that their colleagues can help. They also go to technology. Google search is the next easy alternative, followed by looking in the library. Going outside the organization is the last resort for most people. When they do use social networks, what engineers are generally trying to do is, first of all, solve problems. They have a range of problems to solve on a daily or weekly basis, and often rely on access to networks of expertise to do their jobs. So social networks need to offer an effective and efficient problem-solving solution. They often also need to enable users to participate in a depersonalized way, particularly where commercially sensitive issues are at play. Collaborative tools are perceived to be of more value to engineers than networking tools very often. And there seems to be demand for some kind of internal platform or private collaboration space, particularly among security-conscious organizations. Importantly, social networks also need to connect into the real world and leverage engineers' points of intersection with the outside world as a starting point. So perhaps by preceding, by pulling in contacts from people's email lists and things like that. It's likely that organizations will want to reach out to engineers to demonstrate and share some of their values and expertise. So in the future, we certainly expect the use of social networks amongst engineers to increase, partly being driven by the younger generation of graduates and early or even mid-level career engineers. Some integration and standardization may occur across different social networking platforms, both internal and external. Some of the other research that Outsell has done has looked at the use of social networking by professionals in general, and I thought it would be of interest here to try and compare that to what was going on with the engineers. Around 28% of professionals surveyed indicate that they use social networking sites. This figure was more than 50% for the engineer community, so really fairly high already. Again, Facebook was most popular, and LinkedIn was second. LinkedIn was far more popular for professional purposes as well. Looking quickly again at age, it's an increasingly poor indicator of likelihood to use social media. Facebook is used by more millennials than Gen Xers or baby boomers, but still we found that almost half of Gen Xers and over 1/4 of baby boomers were users of Facebook. We're also seeing that Facebook and other social networks are quickly becoming legitimate distribution channels for work and academic content, as well as places to find potential new users and provide additional services to existing ones. We do believe that abandoning our own prejudices about age is very important to understand how social networking could develop. Looking at personal versus professional use for professions as a whole, again, LinkedIn is the clear winner in terms of professional usage with 88%, and that's a very similar situation to what we found when we just looked at the engineer market, where around 84% of social networking usage of LinkedIn was for professional purposes. And again, Facebook is the winner for personal usage. Social networkers usually go to a social networking site to do something specific, though, catch up with friends or look for a job. And trying to keep work and personal lives separate can be very important to people online.
Well, thank you very much, Kate. That was terrific. I know you're going to be back in just a moment to share your conclusions, correctly?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
Good. Thank you. All right. For those of you that may have just joined us, we just heard from Kate Worlock of Outsell, and what Kate did is she shared her excellent research around the use of social networks by engineers for building networks of contacts amongst other types of use cases as professional tools. Now we're going to be joined by Alan Belniak, and Alan is the Director of Social Media Marketing at PTC, and he's going to share his perspectives on engineers and social networks. A little bit of a background on Alan. He works at a major Boston software company, PTC, and he focuses on product lifecycle management, where he's employed as the company's Director of Social Media Marketing. In this role, Alan works in strategic and tactical fashions to find ways to use social media channels to better interact with customers and to direct that feedback to marketing, R&D, sales, and other appropriate groups. It's quite fascinating. He also blogs. He'll tell you about that, and he can also be found on Twitter. Alan, absolutely delighted to have you today, so I'm now going to turn this portion of the webinar over to you.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks everyone on the line for joining. So I'll cruise through my own introduction much quicker because Mike did such a great job. So if you are doing the Twitter thing today, hopefully you are, you can use the hashtag #KWebinar, and you can follow me on Twitter if you like at @abelniak. And if you are interested in the blogging space about social media and the following, you can find me over at subjectivelyspeaking.net, and you can find that link on my Twitter profile. So I'm just want to run you through a little bit today about who I am and a little bit more about what I do, and then a brief snapshot about PTC. Some of you on this call, because you're engineers, may know PTC. Some of you don't. I'm not going to make it a product pitch, but I want to give you some context as to what my company is and what they do, because I think it might put my role in some better context. And then I want to focus, the 6 or 7 minutes I have mostly on why we decided to launch our own customer community. So with that, let me jump into a little bit about who I am at PTC. So like Mike said, the company's first ever director of social media. That's both interesting, exciting, and challenging because there's no predecessor I have to go back to say, hey, what did you do last time we came across this problem? So it's really fun. I do act as like a kind of an internal consultant, so when people come to me and ask, gee, how can we leverage, how can we increase webinar attendance from the last time by using social channels, we'll sit down and go over things. So it's really a fun way, but a good way to look at it is I try to figure out where our customers and prospects are spending time online and how we can engage or better engage in those conversations and drive that feedback back into the organizations that Mike mentioned previously. So a little bit about PTC, and the reason why my role is interesting is we've been around the block for 20 years or so. The CAD and PLM, product lifecycle management industry is pretty mature, and that's good, but it's also a little bit conservative. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that it's just always been a little bit conservative. So for a company like PTC to hire someone in this social media, digital media, new media role is pretty cool, pretty exciting. It's fresh. I know some of our competitors have these roles as well. But the idea is that we're putting a focus on this. We know the conversations are happening online, whether or not we take place in those. So we can't ignore them anymore. And we do a good presence of that prior to my role. Now we're going to enhance that presence. So you can understand a little bit about PTC with this slide. We essentially make software that lets people make products. So whether it's a 2D sketch, a 3D history-based sketch, using MathCAD, which MathCAD has a partnership with Novel to do engineering calculations, or to manage all that CAD data and multi-CAD data with Windchill, we make end-to-end software solutions to make products. So as a company, we are 5,000 plus people. We're publicly traded. We're global. We're all over the world. So we work together. We collaborate. We know what it's like to sometimes have to work as a team when people are either 2 doors down the hallway or actually across the ocean. And sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge, but it's through online and face-to-face networks that make that happen. So every year, more than 25,000 companies, as you can see on the slide, use our software. But like I said just a moment ago, not 25,000 of those companies all have people that are located in the same building. So what that calls for is a need to have people kind of connect, not necessarily face-to-face, but also through an online social network. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how and why we created our own customer community. So first off, before I get into us creating our own customer community, I should say we already have one. We have many. We have one, again, for some of you on the call who are familiar with PTC, you may know us as the makers of Pro Engineer or Parametric Technology Corporation. Again, we make lots of other products as well. And we have a group called PTC User. And they're a fantastic organization. They're third-party, independent. We support them because they bring our users together. They bring them together in largely a one-to-one or a one-to-many support type of role. What we wanted to create, because some of the research that we conducted indicated this, and I'll get to that in a moment, was more of an energizing kind of community. And what I mean by energizing is the kind of things that get you really excited and passionate to use the kinds of products we have. In fact, if you go over to communities.ptc.com, you can see the site itself, you can join and all those kinds of things. But you'll see 3 main tenets on that site, and it's showcase, network, and inspire. And when I try to describe what is our community all about to someone else, I say in a very kind of a conversational way, have you ever started to write an email to a colleague and say, hey, check out what I just did, and you attach a file or you attach a link to a network document? That's the kind of stuff that we want to showcase on this community, the kind of stuff that really gets you excited to use the software. So that's the kind of community we set out to create. We knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge because we have PTC User that exists for a bit of a different reason, but it's still there. Plus, there's myriad other communities out there. There's Engineering Exchange, there's Pro Engineer Net, there's all these different kinds of smaller forums that exist. And so we needed to find out what was going to make ours a little bit different. So one of the things we wanted to create was a place where people could come to our site and take part in the conversation there, and also have people from PTC take part in the conversation. People like product managers, product definition, the chief software architects, things like that. Now, that isn't to say we're going to totally ignore activity in other locations, but we figure if we could put it in one place that makes it a little more centrally located, there's a better chance for all the people that matter to talk together. I'll jump ahead to the fourth bullet for just a moment. So when I say all the people that matter, who are the stakeholders? Well, first and foremost, the customers. Obviously, we wouldn't be selling products if we didn't have people to buy it, of course, but also PTC employees themselves, and then Forrester Research, which kind of helped us conduct this study to figure out that this was the right kind of community and whether or not our data supported the launch of this community. And so how do we go about this? Skipping back to the third bullet for just a moment, this was not a 2-week decision. This was very methodical. We had years of collective wisdom from having face-to-face conversations with our customers, from doing our biannual customer events and our other smaller customer events that even happen more often than twice a year. Excuse me. So we have some research that indicated that this was a good idea. What we weren't sure about was what are the online social tendencies of our customers. And Kate kind of highlighted that just a moment ago. And Mike, if you actually step ahead to the next slide, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the research that Forrester did. And so, again, the results of Forrester's survey basically echoed what Kate was just talking about. So if you aren't familiar with this graphic, this is what Forrester calls a social technographics profile. I'm not going to dig into all the details because it's more time than I have, but essentially what they do is they ask people a bunch of questions, and this went out to a worldwide audience, so it's not just U.S., both existing customers and prospects. And basically by asking survey questions, they were able to bucket them or put them into segments, starting from creators, then critics, collectors, and all the way on down to inactive, and you can see that down at the very bottom. And now the numbers won't add to 100% because you can answer a question that puts you in more than one bucket. But the way to really interpret this is that those numbers off on the right in those call-out boxes represent the U.S. online adult average. And the reason we use U.S. online adult average is that tends to be one of the more socially active groups across the globe. So you can see, for example, U.S. online adults, 21%, roughly 1 in 5 are creators. They make YouTube videos, they make podcasts, they do things like that. So 1 in 5. PTC customers, almost half. So when we saw these stats from creators, critics, collectors, joiners, and spectators, PTC customers and prospects are outperforming the U.S. online adult average in all those categories, thus underscoring that first sub-bullet on the left. PTC customers are extremely active in the social space. The one spot where PTC underperforms is inactive, so that's good. It means that roughly 1 in 10 of our customers and prospects are not active in this space, so that's a good thing. So I just wanted to talk about the slide quickly to show you that this was the research that backed up the reasoning why we went ahead and launched the customer community. Now that customer community was launched in June of this year, so it's only a few months old. And as if we can move to the next slide, which is my last slide, I want to cover some stats about how our customer community has been doing so far. Again, focusing on the showcasing, network, and inspiring aspects. We've got more than 6,000 members since June. Now, we did move some people from our existing forums over, so I don't know what the raw net new contribution rate is, but there is a thriving digital metropolis, so to speak, already happening. We have a join rate of about 375 per week. There's more than 5,000 discussions going on at any given time, which is great. You guys can read these slides faster than I can, so let me just call out 1 or 2 more items for your attention. More than 175 wiki documents, which to me is fascinating because that's a document that multiple authors can go in and collaborate and edit, as opposed to just someone posting the web page. More than 220 comments. That means it's someone else saying, hey, that's cool. Hey, that's great work. Hey, can you share that file with me? Again, underscoring the showcasing your work, networking with other digital and product lifecycle management, product development professionals, inspiring others to do work like this. So as I wrap up, I guess I want to underscore is that you can have a social network for engineers that let you kind of find a space together to talk about things, to collaborate, to work together, to share best practices, and get each other excited about the kind of work you do every single day. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Mike, who's going to transition to our next panelist.
Alan, that was fascinating. Terrific job. Great work. Thanks for sharing those insights. And yes, let's get to our last but not least panelist. And we're now going to hear from Satya Sehgal, and we call him Sats. And what he's going to do is share some information on LinkedIn's Industrial Engineering Network. And then we're going to have him come back and join Alan and Kate for some of the closing comments around her research that she started at the top of the webinar. Then we're going to start taking your questions. And we really appreciate the fact that we've got a lot of questions coming in right now. A little bit about Sats. He's president of Sehgal Management Consulting and a partner with Visual Link Enterprises, both located in Toronto, Ontario. And as I said earlier, we're thrilled to have representation from the United States, Canada, and the UK. So it's great to have you with us, Sats. He has a strategic focus, and what it is to help clients create value for their customers in a profitable, sustainable, and socially responsible manner. He created Industrial Engineering Network on LinkedIn. And Sats, it's indeed my pleasure to officially welcome you to our webinar, and I'll now turn this portion over to you. And welcome, Sats.
Great. Thanks very much, Mike, and welcome everybody to this webinar. It's definitely a fantastic one. So as Mike mentioned, my name is Sats Segal. I'm going to just give you a brief agenda of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give you a brief idea of what our company does. Just to set the landscape for this presentation, I'll talk to you about some of the industry facts that we've got. Then I'm going to jump into the actual IE network itself, and I'm going to give you 5 reasons as to why people are using this network. And then just go into more of a generic conversation about social networking tools that are used today and some of the benefits of social networking. So basically our company, if anything, it's a process improvement and engineering standards organization. When we talk to our clients, what really sets us apart in their opinion is that we have a very fresh opinion. What that means is we don't accept status quo. We're always looking for new ideas and new ways of doing things. We continually challenge ourselves, and we're always looking to drive some form of innovation, whether that be process improvement, cost savings, better ways to generate sales. We're always looking out that for our client. I did start this company about 5 years ago, and we've got a large group already, so we've had a pretty successful growth rate. We could be found at Twitter at the link shown, or you can visit www.segal.ca. Now, just to set the context for you in regards to this presentation, 3 very quick facts. In July of 2009, social networking actually surpassed email usage. The top use cases are gradually shifting now towards more of social networking such as Facebook and YouTube and away from Google or Yahoo. So when people are looking to actually do their web searches now, they're actually going on Facebook and YouTube and posting questions to different users rather than going and Googling different answers. And the next generation devices are now really becoming the norm. So you've seen the launch of the iPad, the iPhone, the iPod, the BlackBerries, the different smartphones out there. They're really the new version or the new way of how we're basically going to communicate with others across the world, moving away from conventional emails and even handwritten stuff. So we're really seeing a good, big, solid, strong movement in this sector. Now, just to give you a little background in regards to the IE network. The IE network today is, if not it's one of the biggest IE groups that exist on LinkedIn today. And I created it just about a year and a half ago, but we really saw a lot of traffic over the last year. And just within a year, we've got over 3,500 professionals that are using the website for active communication. As a result, we got a lot of emails because some of our users wanted to see different functionality. So we've created a network or a website right now called the My Industrial Engineering Network, or myienetwork.com. It's currently under renovation, but we're really looking at a lot of the feedback that we're getting from everybody, and we want to integrate that into there as well. So we hope that's going to be a successful launch as well. Now, just to give you a context of the top 5 reasons why people are really using LinkedIn. First and foremost, obviously, it's a social networking site, so it's really to keep in touch with colleagues. Now, this could be a way of keeping in touch with current colleagues, former colleagues, or even generate new contacts. And then another reason is job search and promotion. When we basically we took a sample size of about 100 of our most active users, and we saw that almost around 70% of the actual posts have to do with job search and promotion. Now, that's not to say that they don't fit somewhere else on this list as well. 70% is a fairly indicative number that this is a very good tool for job searching and promotion. Another reason is industry-specific questions. So we found a lot of posters who are posting questions such as, what's the best infrastructure that I should use given my network is set up like this? Or what's the best way to ship a less than trailer load shipment and make sure that it's economical, but at the same time, it delivers value? Reference and verification. We're seeing a lot of organizations moving away from the traditional paper-based or even the background checks where they basically do references and checks on you. Now they can actually go onto LinkedIn and they can look at referrals that kind of act in lieu of a reference, but at the same time, they can see who's referred you, so they can get an idea of types of individuals that are referring you and what your relationship to them was as well. So that's a positive movement as well. And there's a lot of proprietary information sharing that's going on as well. It really enables organizations to communicate sensitive documentation, and there's a lot of discussions on the types of systems that people are using, whether they be on-the-shelf systems or home-based systems. Now, when we basically think of social networking, we basically categorize it in three different ways. Real-time. So real-time would be a good example of, for example, what we're doing right now, a webinar. We're communicating with a lot of folks on the line right now in regards to our feedback or our opinions on social networking. But I'll give you some good examples as well. We worked with a client who basically wanted to show their distribution center to the rest of the company that were located in a completely different country. So interestingly enough, they actually wore a camera on their helmet when they were walking through the distribution center and giving them a tour of the facility itself, and at the same time able to share best practices. So here's a new technology that we've integrated in our distribution center. Maybe you guys can think about it as well. So that's something that's real-time, where the communication is happening right on the spot. Another type of communication is reactive. So LinkedIn is a great example where I'm going to basically post whatever I'm going to post, and somebody will come back to it, whether it be a couple hours later or a couple of days later, and post a response to it. Again, pulling or asking questions such as the question I talked about earlier, the LTL shipments. Now, one thing that I want to stress about social networking is when we think of social networking, often we think of online systems, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Twitter, whether it be LinkedIn. One of the most valuable social networkings, in my opinion, is still face-to-face and in person. When you do online networking, it's a great way to start. It's a great way to get a contact and start a contact. But to really build and foster a working relationship, you really need to spend time with that person in person, face-to-face, and really get to know each other and have a good working relationship out of that. Now, some of the benefits of social networking. I'm going to give you some real examples that actually happened with us. So for the first one, the ability to push updates out to a network. Now, this is actually a true story where we had a university student, or he had a couple of years experience, and unfortunately, one of the things to work with us is you need to have an actual professional engineering license, because we didn't need to sign off on certain diagrams and so forth. So this particular individual didn't have that license. Interestingly enough, the minute the person got the license, they posted that on Twitter. And that only not went to me, but it also went to a whole bunch of other people in the organization who got sight to the fact that this person is not qualified and he's got a professional engineering license. And because of that, we actually brought him onto our team. I mean, that was part of it. I mean, he obviously had the right skill set as well. But another way of letting people know of your successes as well, such as getting that license, it increases collaboration through groups. So, for example, you can set up groups online on Facebook, study groups. You can set up different types of conversation groups. You can set them up based on whether you're in a particular discipline of engineering or so forth, and share your feedback relative to that particular area as well. That's something you don't. It's difficult to get in person. It's difficult to get that feedback from everybody. But when you actually build a network online, you can actually get feedback from people from all across the world. And again, driving that innovation and process improvement. Internal proprietary software. One of the things that we've seen with some of our clients is they really want to push on internal software as a means for communication. So this is moving away from email, but moving now more towards a forum or Facebook-like page within the actual company as well, where they can post videos, where they can post pictures. And these are more used on a professional standpoint. So if there's an incident, for example, with a trailer, I can post a picture. Or if there's a certain type of network that I want to explain, I can make a video of it so that everybody across the organization has means to it. It really enables more channels of communication. So again, going back to that Twitter example is a great example, and that is, I can basically post, my new job, or I can post any new skill set that I've got and push it out to everybody. And I can post it through different means, whether it be LinkedIn, whether it be Twitter, whether it be other social networks out there. So it opens more lines of communication as well, and really increases efficiency through business settings. So I'm going to give you a really good example here as well. There's an organization that was going out of business, and one of the things they needed to do is they really needed to liquidate their equipment very quickly. So what they did is they actually made use of social networks, such as Craigslist, for example, where they're able to post this information. Hey, listen, I've got an organization, we're shutting down, I can give you the equipment at X percentage off. Sure enough, they got a buyer fairly quickly. So again, a very successful story as well behind that as well. I'm going to now turn it back over to Mike.
Well, thank you, Sats. Great story. And actually, stick around because we're now going to call back Kate and Alan to join with Kate in sharing some of her conclusions and putting it all together. And then we have a lot of questions that we're going to start asking you. So, Kate and Alan, I welcome you back. So, Alan and Sats, are you back online with us?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want, I can kind of give my...
Yeah.
I can round out some thoughts and maybe have Kate join us at the end, maybe?
Absolutely. Why don't you go for it?
Great. So, just another minute or so here, just so we can jump to the questions after Sat speaks. Is I think something that they keep in mind is that, and I've seen some of the questions on Twitter too, is that I think we all know that engineers and frankly a lot of digital professionals are using social networks. I think one thing to keep in mind too is that social networks aren't just LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. They're all kinds of networks. It's a church group. It's a softball group. It's a web discussion forum. So I think what we need to keep in mind is looking at other places to find connections to help you do your job. Because at the end of the day, it's talking to someone who sits right next to you or someone who's across the ocean. And even using email, that's a social network. So it's finding different ways to get done the job that you have to do. And I think. Earlier, Kate had mentioned things about Facebook. The fastest growing segment of Facebook is women from 45 to 65, and that's because that's where a lot of their grandkids, their kids are posting pictures of their grandkids. So the social and professional lines of specific social networking sites are definitely blurring. So, Stats, do you want to offer up anything else?
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, that was one of the things that I really wanted to stress through the slides is that social networking is not just online based. To Alan's point, it could be your church or your community as well. And I think that's something we don't want to lose sight of when we move into when we go forward. Yes, things like Twitter and Facebook are becoming a lot more popular. But like I said, you really need to build that relationship in person. That's the only way that it's going to be a healthy relationship as well going forward. So. I totally agree and support the fact that social networkings are definitely beyond just online tools.
Well, thanks. And, what I love about doing this live is you never know what's going to happen, but I think we have Kate. Kate, are you back with us?
Yes, I just fell off because my battery died, unfortunately. That shows the limits of technology, doesn't it? I do apologize.
Well, go ahead and perfect. I'll let you bring this to a conclusion, and then we'll continue with the next section.
Excellent. Yeah, I think just the conclusion points that I wanted to make were really that we're seeing the professional uses of social networking evolving from being a tool which is seen as being convenient for communication to enabling groups of individuals to collaborate with each other either on a public or a private basis, and to do that on specific issues. Users are showing quite a high tolerance for using multiple networks to be able to undertake these kinds of tasks, provided those networks tie closely to the functional role of their specific job. So the value proposition of those networks needs to stay very, very, very focused and needs to be very aligned to the performance and productivity and progress of the people who are using those networks.
Well, thank you. And Kate and Sats and Alan, we're going to have you back in just a second, but now we'd like to turn to the audience and ask you for your vote on our final poll, and that is, do you, or in which ways do you think social networks will play a role in the future for engineers? And please go ahead and select all that apply. We'll go ahead and share those results in just a moment, and then I'm going to start asking the questions that many of you in the audience have sent in. I think just about everybody who's voted has voted, so I will now go ahead and close the poll. And let's share the results, and they should be on your screen right now. So, Kate, you may want to, and Sats and Alan, if you have anything that comes to top of mind, maybe you could share that with us in the question and answer period. But I think it's quite interesting that the highest reason here is improving knowledge sharing and sharing expertise, followed by increasing collaboration on projects. Kate, any comments on this? How does this align with your research?
Well, I think it aligns pretty closely. I would say that certainly increasing collaboration on projects is probably one of the areas that we saw highlighted by a lot of people in the research work that we've undertaken. So that's clearly a very important point. And I think associated to that is being able to collaborate in the way which makes you and your organization feel comfortable. So that's not necessarily through a public social network forum, but it could be through a private space enabled on a forum of that kind.
Very interesting. Well, terrific. So you should now see on your screen some ways to continue the discussion on Facebook, on Twitter, or to learn more about Novel. There's the website, and this information will go out with the link to today's recording. So if you don't have a chance to copy it all down now, you will get a copy of it. So let's get into the first set of questions that we have here. And the question is, how do you recommend handling information communication guidelines? And the second part to that is, how do you set guidelines for company employees who participate in social media? Kate, would you like to lead off with that, and then we'll go around the table?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think if you want to really try to use social media and social networks effectively within an organization, it's important to try and make it clear from the outset what the parameters around that usage should be. It's all very well saying, we're a networked connected company and, we've got X% of our employees tweet regularly and X% are on social networks. That's all very well, but you need to try to define what you hope they'll get out of it, how you need it to improve your business, and you need to be very clear about what those goals are, and then see how the usage is going, and perhaps make sort of tweaks and adjustments and undertake training with individuals to be able to get that going effectively.
Alan or Sats, would you like to jump in on that, and then we'll get to the second part of the question?
Sure. This is Alan. I'll echo what Kate said and just add the following, and this is all about semantics, is that if you call it a policy, that's a little bit of a negative connotation. You call it a guideline, that's much more inviting. If you write these guidelines that say, listen, we want you to get out there, we want to have you participate, here are some things to keep in mind, much more positive, as opposed to leading with, don't say the following. In fact, PTC has created some of these own guidelines. We posted them internally. And actually, I forget the URL, but if you just Google publicly available social media policies guidelines, there's a list of more than 180 companies who have made their guidelines public. So don't reinvent the wheel. Go borrow someone else's and modify as you see fit.
Great. Sats?
Again, I think what Kate and Alan said was fairly consistent with what I'm thinking. The only thing that I'd add to that is in terms of support for an internal social networking guidelines and so forth, you really need top-level support going down into that. So we can create guidelines for certain groups or certain areas of the organization, but to really make effective use of the tool, encourage, as Alan said, encourage information sharing. It really needs that top-level support. So as a part of the guidelines, getting the feedback and the buy-in from some of the upper management is key, in my opinion, in getting some of those guidelines up and running and started.
Well, Sats, as long as I have you up, we'll go around the horn on this one too, but this one I think would be also related to you. It says, can you give the top 3 ways to drive community engagements with engineers? I
mean, there's various ways that you can drive that. Again, I mean, I want to move away and when I say social networking, I don't want to specifically stick to online tools. With engineers, I mean, and again, this is my opinion. With engineers, it's very discipline specific. So you can cross collaborate between what a computer engineer and mechanical or industrial would do, but some of the actual business related issues are really specific to that, specific to the discipline you're in. So one of the things I would really encourage is get involved with something that pertains to your industry or your discipline. That's a great way to start to build your network, to build conversation pieces and so forth. The second one is don't be afraid to go around your organization, or again going back to that face-to-face communication. Look at some of your old organizations, such as your university alumni, which is a good way to build contacts and a good way to build networks as well. Don't ever close doors to that option as well. But having said that, also, there is a component of social networking that I would say, such as LinkedIn, where you can, if you want to learn about a specific topic or a specific area, get involved with some of the community experts in that area. Come to webinars like this. It's a great way to get information so that you can drive conversation within your own organization.
Thanks, Sats. Alan, would you like to jump in on that?
So again, Sats had a great bit of content. The only thing I'd like to echo there is that if you're interested in getting involved but you don't know how to start, just start writing. Just start writing. Put it in a Word doc. Talk to someone in your web team and maybe put it up internally. Just if you want to be a thought leader, I hate to use that phrase, or if you're smart on the topic, put it down on digital paper and start to share it. In time, you can find a way for it, but as you get those ideas, put it on paper, shoot a quick video, record a quick bit of audio, just get it captured, and then look at how to purpose it and repurpose it later, and then in time, things will kind of fall into place.
Thanks, Alan. Kate, here's one for you. What population did Outsell survey?
It was a survey of around 400 different engineers. They were mostly U.S. and Canadian based, and we did it about 9 months ago now, I think.
Thank you. Alan, here's a question for you. How is the PTC community promoted?
So it's promoted a little bit on the PTC website, the external website itself. It's promoted through a Twitter channel. It's cross-promoted on some of our Facebook presence for some of our other products, and some people are also including it in their email signatures, and then through, believe it or not, good old-fashioned word of mouth, actually talking to people.
Well, here's another question to follow on. Someone in the audience says, your Twitter feed asked whether global companies localize their social media efforts into other languages. Question is, have you received any good feedback on this question?
That's great. I actually just asked that question earlier today. I'm glad someone hopped on Twitter and saw my feed. I received one response so far. I've actually asked the question in LinkedIn as well, so I'm using my own social network to get the answers. And the response was that, no, they largely aren't. And I think the person who was responding to me was responding mostly about Twitter, because if you think about it, Twitter's so fast-moving. To spend some time localizing into 9 or so languages could be a bit challenging. Other people localize things like blog posts and audio and podcasts and things like that. My sense is that they don't, but I'm still looking for more information. So,
thanks, Alan. Sats, let's see if this one would be something you would have some insight on. Question is, have companies' policies been considered as a barrier to update in the use of social networking?
I think that really depends on the organization. Do I think it does? Absolutely. I don't think social networking is strongly accepted yet as a viable communication within an organization. So there are companies that will ban you actually from using things like Twitter, which could completely be used for organizational reasons. I'll give you an example. I've got an actual friend of mine who uses Twitter a lot to recruit people because she's part of HR. But if you go to another organization, it's against their policies to go on a social network like that as well. So I think it's really industry and organization specific. Some organizations are more open to it. I think the trend, though, going forward is that a lot of organizations are jumping on the social networking bandwagon. So I think those policies will start to change over time. But I do think that right now there are barriers, but I do strongly feel that will change over time.
Thank you. Well, we've got about 20 seconds left for Kate and Alan and Sats to give us some closing comments, and then we're going to give you some additional information. So, Kate, if there's some additional comments and thoughts and call to action you'd like to leave the audience with, please take that opportunity.
Yeah, I suppose a closing thought would just be that I think that what we've seen is a very high usage of Facebook for personal reasons. And it'll be just as interesting to watch how those kinds of services are used personally, because people's personal usage will inform their expectations of what a professional service can also deliver. Thank you. Alan?
The only thing I can just kind of re-echo what I said earlier is that consider that networks are beyond just the big four that you think of. They're face-to-face, and look at multiple ways of communicating as ways to connect the social network and make it tighter and leverage that for your information.
Thank you. And Sats, closing thought from you. This has been fantastic, folks, but go ahead, Sats.
Yeah, I mean, in closing, what I would say is, as I mentioned earlier, face-to-face communication is vital. However, having said that, we are moving to, in a new era of technology where social networking online is becoming a fantastic tool. So I would say embrace the change. Try to work with it, understand it, learn it, and make the best use of it for yourself.
Well, thank you. And folks in the audience, we want to thank all of you for joining us today. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And as I said at the top of the webinar, I hope you found it of value, and you'll want to join us for future events. As mentioned, you're going to be receiving a short survey in just a moment at the end of the webinar. We'd really appreciate you taking a few moments to fill it out and let us know how today met your expectations. And those questions that we couldn't answer on air, and apologize, there were a lot of them, we will have our panelists start to reply to your questions over the next few days, and a copy of today's recorded webcast will be made available as an on-demand viewing, and all of you will be receiving an email with a link to access this recording. You should get that at the early part of next week with some additional information. I want to give special thanks to our speakers, Kate Worlock, Alan Belniak, and Satya Segal, and of course our host, Ross Graber of Novel, for making today's webinar possible. And again, as your moderator, this is Mike Agron saying thank you, have a great rest of the week, and bye for now.